Welcome to episode 3 of the Open Door podcast, where we explore issues surrounding cultural identity with people of different ethnic and professional backgrounds. My name is Anthony.
And my name is Patrick. This week we talked to Jun Kit. He is the co-founder and managing director of Resonate, which is a news and entertainment website for the East Asian community.
He has over 9 years of experience working for Chinese Central Television, Xinhua TV Agency, Phoenix TV, and Propeller TV.
The link for his website is in the description if you want to check that out. As usual, we've got timestamps there too. Let's jump right into it.
You're the co-founder and managing director of Resonate. Can you give us the story of how Resonate came to be?
Resonate was created 4 or 5 years ago between me and a guy called Kohan. So I'm the managing director of Resonate, so I'm in charge of the publicity and what we do with it as a brand and a company. Kohan's in charge of the editorial. So one of the things when I met Kohan was that his background was in writing. He was interested in music. So he used to write for Gigwise and Huffington Post about music. And my background was in news journalism. So I got talking to Kohan, and I was talking to him about this idea about publication for British Chinese people, because at the time it didn't really exist. I mean, 4 or 5 years ago, it wasn't really in the language to talk about the issues that we're talking about today. I mean, you look in social media today, everyone's talking about what's racism, what's cultural appropriation, what's this issue, why should we be concerned about this? 4 or 5 years ago, we didn't have anything. The only thing that we ever talked about that concerned British Chinese people in this country was when Dave Whelan used the word chink to describe East Asian people, and Nigel Farage said it was okay at the time. And I remember when this was announced in the BBC, I was like, where is our publication? Where's the media? Where's the uproar? You know, he literally said it's okay to call us chinks, and that's what they used up north, and it's fine. I'm like, that's not a thing. So me and Kohan decided, you know what, rather than wait for one, let's just create it ourselves. Because if you don't create it yourself, it just doesn't get done. So me and Kohan just put our heads together and we just created Resonate.
Is there a story behind why it's called Resonate?
Oh my God, discussing names are the hardest things when you do anything. Like if you manage a podcast yourself, even thinking about names, you're thinking, because the name tells us everything about you as an organization. And one of the things that we didn't want to move too into was this whole Asian thing. Because me and Kohan, we're very British Chinese. He's British, Chinese, Malaysian. We like English things just as much as we love the Asian parts of our identity. And at first we were like, oh, let's call ourselves Chinese News or Lucky News or Dragon. And then we just think, that's not us, you know. We went to that side, we actually considered it. We decided on Resonate is because back then it's very difficult to find any articles that has an East Asian features in it. And when I was reading these articles, I thought, wow, that's really resonated with us. And I think Kohan's the one who coined the word resonate. And then the more I think about it, the more I think, yeah, that's actually a pretty good name. Like, it's very neutral and people don't really know what it is. But it speaks a lot of volumes that we're not just a traditional, you know, Asian person that society sees us. We're different. And we like to think that our editorial resonates with a lot of people because people read that and think, yeah, I get that. I get why that person's feeling the way he feels.
What kind of articles do you tend to publish?
We have 2 different types of articles that we have on our website. We have news and we have features.
Right.
Features are basically any story that we publish from people. Resonate isn't my full-time job. Okay. I do this at night as well as my day job because working in the media is not as lucrative as people think it is. So I do most of my work at Resonate at home. And due to the nature of news, I do it 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, because news doesn't stop. So me and Kohan writes the news, and I just do the other sort of running of the bits and pieces. So generally we do the boring stuff, and we leave writers the stuff that they want to do. I talked about how important it is to get writers to write about things that they're passionate about, and that's what we tend to do. Basically, when Resonate started, we had trouble looking for writers, or looking for people to be interested in media. Journalism wasn't really a thing that people tend to gravitate towards a career. So me and Kohan, we told us to the writers that we do the boring stuff and you do the fun stuff. Because media is fun. It's like you guys, you know, when you do the show, you talk to people from so many different fields. You learn from them, you're interested in life. And then that's what we let our writers do. We tend to just let our writers to just do whatever things that they're passionate about.
Sure.
We used to have one writer who used to be passionate about restaurants. So she just went out and just ate restaurants and just write if they're good or not. I mean, when we started it, we never thought it would be like that, but that was what she was passionate about. We have one writer right now who's interested about fashion. So she writes about fashion and what's happening for East Asian diaspora. And then we also have like interviews with movie stars. And we also send people to places. If there was like an Asian American comedy fest or Asian American film festival, we normally send to writers like, oh, do you want to go? You know, have fun, talk to people, but give us a feature. You know?
Yeah.
So it's giving opportunities for young people. And I think that's really important to do.
So what kind of experience did you have before you started up Resonate?
When I graduated, I didn't know what I wanted to do. It was a new world. You know, when you graduate, you just pushed out the door.
Yeah.
And you think, no, okay, just apply for grad schemes. I was like, yep, I went to Christchurch, not going to get a grad scheme. And I was just thinking, what do I want to do? And then like, I came across a job being cameraman for Phoenix Television. And I sort of just applied and said, oh, I did media. I'm quite interested in news media. And this woman called Cynthia Hung, invited me for an interview. And she just literally gave me a job. I had no camera experience at all. And she goes, okay, you just learn on the job. And I have no idea why she hired me, to be honest. Maybe I was cheap. Maybe I could carry, maybe I could just carry heavy goods. Or maybe she saw something on me that I never thought about. So I worked for Phoenix Television in news for 3 years. So basically, anything that was happening during a certain period, between 2008 to 2011 maybe, I was there. I just did my news reports and send the packages back to China. So whatever people see in China during that period was just stuff that I'd done in the UK. Eventually I moved on from there. Then I worked in Xinhua, which is a Chinese news agency. So they're government funded, a news organisation. And I worked there for 2 years, but I wanted to sort of do something a little bit different. And I got offered a job by China Central Television. At the time, I sort of developed this weird niche of helping Chinese reporters work in UK because I had a lot of knowledge of who to talk to in press office, contacts, how to get their story, where to go filming. So CCTV offered me a job. And I thought, if I'd done the other two companies, I might as well try what CCTV is like. Unfortunately, I didn't really enjoy working there and I felt a bit despondent. And that's when I found a job at the British Chinese Project. And that's where I met Kohan to do Resonate.
Right.
So that was my career before Resonate. And from there, I carried on my news career with Resonate. So in total, it would be like 10 years plus. Oh my God, it sounds so old. 10 years plus. But like I did like 6.5 years of Chinese media television.
I was recently talking to another British Chinese. We just happened to talk about journalism too. I asked him what his dreams were when he was younger. And he told me when he was doing his GCSEs, he really wanted to be a journalist. But unfortunately, his parents advised against it, saying that it's unethical to pry into people's lives. So he was swayed from doing it. I just wondered, how did your parents react to your career in the media?
My mum's a very traditional person, a simple person, but in the nicest way. I didn't mean to sound horrible. But she sees the world in really simplistic terms. Like, you get a job, work 9 o'clock to 5 o'clock, go home, save money, buy a house, have a family. That's how she viewed the life for me. I think it's quite typical for many Asian parents. But the reality is not like that. We don't live in that world anymore. Like, 9 to 5 is only on paper. You know, we work excess hours, we work overtime. She didn't really understand the world that I was living in. She understands what I did, and she's quite happy that I did something that's really quite interesting. Because sometimes I tell her stories. Oh, I did this, I met this person today. Oh, I met the Prime Minister of China, or I met Andy Murray. You know, I met all these interesting people. And then she's quite proud of that. But she always wanted me to get a normal job because she can see that there's no future. And then the problem with news journalism is that there's not really a promotion system. That doesn't really exist. You just carry on doing your craft and get good at your crafts. She's always wants me to like be an accountant. So you're accountant level 1, level 2, level 3, quantifiable career. And she really doesn't like me working in the media, to be honest. One of the reasons is it's not stable. She doesn't understand why I keep going from company to company. New editor comes in, doesn't like you, and they push you aside for someone else. There's lots of office politics. My mum worked in a fish and chip shop for 30 years of her life, or, you know, takeaways. She knows the owner, she is the owner. She does everything, she understands that. People stay in the same jobs. Nowadays, you just don't. And one minute I could say, yeah, I'm working for 3 years. Next minute, the station manager comes in and goes, oh yeah, you don't work here anymore. Then I have to look for a job. Unfortunately, that's a real story, you know, and she hates that fact. She hates the fact that it's unknown.
Was she quite strict about it? You know, did she try and steer you away from media?
She steers me away from the media because that's what she thought was the best thing to do. I remember when there was a dark period in my life, when I was trying to look for a job, and I couldn't find anything that I liked or couldn't find anything that I was qualified for. This was after 6-7 years of experience working. And I remember my mum like saying, oh, I have a friend who works for TFL, and he says, go on this website, you could find jobs. I know what she's trying to do to encourage me to look beyond media, but she just doesn't understand that fact that if you're not qualified for a job, then you just can't get it. You can't apply for anything. She doesn't understand that world that we live in the 21st century in Britain. I can feel her disappointment in me. It's one of the saddest parts of my life, is that every time she looks at me, or when I get annoyed about something in the media, I can just feel some disappointment in me that I should have done something else. And I'm still not too sure how to handle that disappointment to this day. People tell me like, oh, ignore it, you've done well for yourself. But a part of me just really wants to make my parents proud, but I know it's impossible. So I just live with it.
Especially in Western countries, everyone seems to not really care about what their parents think. They don't really care to get their parents' approval for things. I mean, I'm definitely generalizing, but it's just my experience. A lot of advice that I get given from my white British friends is often just, oh, I mean, if she doesn't think what you're doing is worthwhile, then, you know, screw that.
People don't understand, like Western people don't really understand sometimes the burden of family. In our culture, being British and Chinese, family is everything. My mum made a point, she didn't really make a point, but I made a point in my head that Mondays and Sundays were the days that they didn't work. So I had to stay at home to have dinner with them because it's the only family time that we have. My friends would ask me, do you want to come out? I'd be like, nope, having family dinner at home. And they're like, why? But for us, it's important as a family to do that. And the fact that I was an only child didn't really help. So like for her focus was on me. And sometimes it's a bit suffocating looking back now. But that's just parcel being British Chinese.
Yeah, because for them, having dinner with their family is like an every evening occurrence. Whereas for kids that had parents that worked in takeaways and you know, that sort of stuff, it was only on their day off that you got to eat with your parents. So I always tried to make the most of that.
It's almost like our lives compared to Western people are inverted. I remember coming home from school most days and not seeing my parents at all until the next morning, because obviously they were working. They work until 1 a.m. sometimes, so I always felt quite envious of people whose parents came home 5 sharp and had dinner together and watched movies in the evenings as family. So during childhood, I felt, in a very strong sense, I wouldn't say envy, because that word is not strong enough. I would say jealousy, actually, of the fact that why wasn't my life the same as everyone else's? Did you guys feel the same way?
I think this goes back to the end. I didn't want to be Chinese when I was younger. I think you hit some raw nerves when you said that. Now, our parents sacrificed a lot in their lives.
Right.
Working in those jobs are very, very tough, especially in a world where they literally just came in with nothing and started a business and then started a family and, you know, put us through university and put us through education just for us to get the lives that they never had. And they made lots of sacrifices, like working hours, not seeing their kids growing up. I remember exactly what he said. 3:30, mum picks me up. 4 o'clock, she goes to work. And then like I may see her at 10 o'clock at night. That's if I'm lucky. My dad, I never see. Like I see him at 11:30. Yeah. And most of that time he spent watching Chinese TV at night. And then like wake up, we begin the cycle again. So I don't really have that time with my parents. When you go on school holidays, when kids are always like, oh yeah, I went on holiday, I went to Portugal, you know, or like, oh, my parents took me to here. And I'm like, well, my parents made me work, you know. Yeah. Like, that's the only quality time I get with my parents. Yeah. And it's, you know what, that's the part of being Chinese I found quite tough growing up. It taught me a lot, but I just found it quite tough because I felt quite distant towards them in a way. And it sort of gives me time to do my own thing, I guess, and be my own person without them. They don't really understand the world that we live in, so I never had that guidance of what I want to do with my life. So I spent most of my youth and like young adult life just being lost, not knowing what to do, because the advice that they give me, it's life advice, but it's not relevant to the experience I'm going through today. Yeah. And I find it quite difficult growing up as a British Chinese person in the UK. Do you have anything similar, Patrick?
Yeah, I remember as a kid, there was almost a resentment for my mum and her work ethic. I found that there wasn't really a very good work-life balance. It meant that she would miss things like school plays and stuff like that. But looking back on it now, I definitely have an appreciation for all the hard work that she had to put in, because obviously she was working for me at the end of the day. She didn't miss my school plays because she actually just didn't want to go. She had a commitment to me and to provide. And looking back on it, I just didn't appreciate that enough. And I just thought, oh, she just loves working more than me. But obviously that's not the case. It must have been quite difficult to miss all of that stuff and just be stuck at work. I'm sure she would have rather have been at that play. You know, she only gets one day off a week, which is Mondays. And I just can't imagine. It's more than a full-time job, you know. Working at the takeaway, you've got to do prep during the day. And then you might take a break for lunch. And then it's just full go in the evenings. And you don't finish till midnight. And it's so physically taxing as well.
My mum was a housewife as well. So she had to do laundry and the housework.
Yeah.
So, you know, she never stops. I think now talking about to you guys it makes me think. Yeah, now I know why she's the way she is. Because my mum's retiring at the moment, and her new hobby is hassle me about life. And I just thought, wow, she must be so bored right now. But that's true. Like she's been working for like 12 hours a day or 24 hours a day, and now she's sort of retiring. She doesn't really know what to do with herself. It's the life that she led for the sacrifices they make for us.
The next thing I was going to mention was just, again, I relate to Jun Kit about the constant worry that you're letting your parents down. Because obviously, with all this hard work, you don't want them to feel like it was just wasted effort. You know, you want to make them feel like it was worth it. It's a difficult thing, especially Asian parents with really high standards. Sometimes my mum, lately she's been a bit more chill about it, and she has told me in recent years that she's proud of me, but because she's just not used to saying stuff like that, I think it's quite hard for her to say. So, and it's weird for me to hear as well. I'm not a person that's accustomed to praise. You know, when people say nice things about me, I'm just like, oh, just stop criticizing me, please. I don't know how to handle it. I don't know about you guys with strict parents and stuff like that. Do you have that experience?
I suffered from really bad depression during the time when I was looking for work, and when my mum's like TFL thing broke my heart because she didn't really understand what was going on in my life. And when you sort of get into the cycle of depression, it's really difficult for you to do anything. People saying depression is just make you feel sad all the time, but it's not really. It's not that. It's the absence of emotion.
Right.
The apathy towards the society and apathy for you to look after yourself. I know she doesn't really have high expectations, but I just remember letting her down. I remember letting her down by all the choices I made. I regret working in a career in media because I just couldn't find something else at the time. And I just regret all the things that you told me, all the sacrifices she made, all the things that she'd done in her life, and for her son to be a bum. Someone else's like family friends who's like a doctor. And like, it's like, why can't I be that? Why can't I make those right choices? I call it immigrant guilt because that's what it feels like. I was just wasting my life because I didn't make the right choices in life to help me or help my family, and I just felt really awful. I think I had depression. I seeked help eventually, privately actually. I didn't tell my mum about this, but I had to do what I had to do just to get myself on track, go back to normal, because it was just really, really tough just facing her every day and just thinking, I shouldn't have done this, I shouldn't have done this, what did I do wrong with my life? You know, I just wasted my life, I wasted everything. It's a horrible thing to have. But I don't tell her that she's one of the sources to my depression, because she's one of the many sources. But it's just what happens in life, in my life.
I've heard stories of people saying that they think their Asian parents don't believe in depression. I've had that experience myself, having conversations with my own mum. The way she deals with it implies that it doesn't exist.
I think that's a greater sense in greater society, not just Asian parents. Maybe even more so of Asian parents, a little bit more. I think because there's not really talked about in Asian society. There's more discussions now, but we have World Mental Health Day. We have tea breaks where encourage people to talk about their problems. We talk about mental health a lot more now in the last maybe 10 years than ever before. My mum growing up, she didn't really have that. You know, they watch TVB dramas where the theme was never about a person getting depression. It's always about, oh, this person had an affair with this person, or this person killed this person. You know, they watch melodrama. When you say it doesn't exist, it's just, people just don't understand it.
And one thing I sort of learned, or I guess realised, is that the best thing that we can do for our parents is to not blame them for their parenting style. Like, for my mum, I realised that, you know, maybe some of the things that she did when raising me wasn't perhaps the most healthy option, but it's the best that she knew how to do. It's the only thing she knew how to do, and at the end of the day, it's not entirely her fault. She just wasn't aware of, perhaps a better way to teach me how to do something.
No, that's true. It's because it's the world that they understand.
Yeah.
Is what they grew up with. I think with most people, we like to learn errors of what happened in the past.
Yeah.
To correct them in the future. Maybe I'll be a family man one day, and maybe I'll make the same errors as my mum. But I like to think that I will learn errors that she has done and to correct myself. But her upbringing has made me who I am today, and I wouldn't really change that.
Yeah, exactly. Like her tough parenting style kind of made me a much emotionally stronger person, like emotionally resilient, I would say. And it's not like necessarily healthy, and I'll admit that much, but I kind of appreciate it. I think it did me good because, when other people give me crap now, I don't really take it. But yeah, Jun Kit, what you're saying about with your depression, you didn't really tell your mum about getting help and stuff. I feel like there's a responsibility on our end to sort of not let them know that in some ways they did sort of fail us as parents. Fail is a very harsh word, but do you sort of get what I mean, where I'm going with this?
Yeah, I do. I don't want to feel like they failed.
Right, yeah.
I don't want to upset them. People can relate to the fact that sometimes you just don't tell parents bad things that happen in your life. Breakups, not getting the pay rise that you wanted, or not getting that job that you applied for. We just generally don't tell bad news to people, especially once to your parents, because they will feel sad for you. The last thing I want at that time was someone being sad for me. Because it just changed the dynamic. I just couldn't deal with it emotionally. She was like walking on eggshells around me. I like to take responsibility for my actions, and one of the responsibilities was to get help, and that's probably the most toughest thing I ever did. But I had help from someone, so I just got help and just did it.
Yeah, glad to hear that. Did you have problems in your childhood opening up to your parents about mental health and emotional problems?
Of course. I think every language barrier is really difficult.
Yes.
You know what? I think many British Chinese people relate to this, is that our Chinese is good, but it's not great.
Yeah.
There's only certain words that we can express. I learned most of my Chinese from what parents, how they speak to me.
Right.
It's like a common way. I can't really describe it to English people. It's like if you had the vocabulary of someone from Shameless, compare to someone with the vocabulary from a BBC newsreader.
Yeah.
Like, I speak Cantonese, but I can't understand the news because it's formal Cantonese.
Right.
So when you ask my parents ask me what's wrong, I can't explain to them what's really going on in my head, except for really childish terms or really simplistic terms of what's going on.
Yeah.
There's always that language barrier. The emotional barrier, yeah, always. But language barrier is the most difficult part to overcome. Because I can't explain to my parents what it feels like to go for an interview and how weird the interview is, or why I didn't get a job, or why my story was really rubbish or rejected. I can't explain to my parents what Facebook is. There's always that barrier that you have growing up. That's why many British Chinese people relate to their cousins more. I'm really close to my cousin. She's like my sister to me. Like, anything that goes on in my life, I talk to her, and then she can talk to my mum because her Cantonese is better. But that's how I always communicated. Like, there's always that barrier. I think you guys can relate to that.
I have some British Chinese friends, and they speak to their parents in English, and their parents reply back to them in Cantonese. For me, it's a very strange dynamic, because I always try to respect my parents, to communicate in the language they are comfortable in, regardless of how uncomfortable I am. So, personally, speaking English to my parents seems very disrespectful, so I always try to cater to them. I'm not sure what you guys think.
I think disrespectful is a bit of a strong word. We communicate the best of how we communicate. If that's how you did it when you was 10 years old, you just carry it on out of habit. Like, my parents could speak to me in English and I speak to them in Chinese. It just comes like second nature. When my parents speak to me, I speak to them in Chinese because their English isn't that good. So that's how I did it. But I know, like, some parenting, I've seen my uncles parent my cousins. He always goes in Chinese and he makes a point with it.
Yeah. So one of my uncles is trying to improve his English. So whenever I go to visit him, he always speaks to me in English. But growing up, we always spoke Chinese to each other. So it's weird when he speaks English to me, and I just automatically, I don't even make a conscious effort to reply in Cantonese, but I do. But he's starting to ask me to speak to him in English now, so he can develop his English a bit better.
It is weird, but it's very admirable in your uncle's part. But then again, speaking in Cantonese is like practice for us. Like, we get better at our Cantonese, speaking Cantonese more.
Do you know much about your heritage?
It's tough, like, you know, like with heritage, I'm really fascinated by where we come from. But my parents don't really see that as a interesting thing to talk about. Like, I would love to sit them down and do an oral history about their lives, but they just don't really get why I'd be interested in that.
Yes.
Because there's so much about their stuff, about their past, that they just don't really want to talk about. My parents are very focused onto the future and the present, never onto the past. You know, I'm really quite jealous of English people when they go, yeah, and my granddad used to do this, and my granddad used to do that. Like, I don't really know what my granddad really done. And my dad didn't see why it's important. He just goes, oh, he was a farmer. Farm of what? It's like, things. What things? Like, come on, man, give me something to work on here.
Yeah, my mum's not hugely sentimental.
Yeah,
and I think,
it's like a sentimentality, that's it.
yeah, and when I ask her about the past, I think they just don't really make a point to remember. Whereas in England, it's much more of a bigger deal. So when kids make family trees for homework or whatever, like it was difficult for me. I remember not really being able to go that far back, to be honest. I think I went maybe as far as my grandparents, and then that was it.
Yeah.
But people had huge ones. They'd come in with like A0 posters.
And do you ever get that one kid who like always brings back something from the 40s or the 50s?
Yeah.
Or something from the 1800s, like, oh, this was the gas mask that my granddad had during the Second World War. Everyone has like these really, really cool stuff. And the oldest stuff in my house was like a duvet cover that my mum had, like, she kept until she like came to England, like back in the 80s. I'm like, come on, mum.
I think the oldest thing I've gotten from my parents is a dictionary, a really battered dictionary from the 80s or 90s. That's the only thing I have.
That's the thing that you keep for the future generation, you know. I'll do that, you know. I would just take the stuff from my mum's house and like batter it a bit and just go, yeah, your grandma learned English from this book here.
From this book here. This book.
She started a business, yeah, and a family based on this book, okay?
Exactly.
And you complaining that you don't know algebra? Oh god, I'm going to be one of those Asian parents, aren't I? Except for my, like, you know, my vocabulary more colourful and they will understand me.
Yeah. I really hope I'm not going to be that kind of parent with really high expectations. I remember, like, the most memorable thing my mum said in my childhood was one time after school, I think I got not straight A's, basically. And she was just like, you've got one job in life, and that's just to study. And you can't even do that. Like, what hope is there for you? And I was just like, it's not that easy, though. It's not that simple. But that's just what it was like in her head. You know, you've got one job. You don't have any responsibilities. You don't have bills to pay. Yeah, I just hope I'm not that kind of parent. I hope I'm going to be a bit more reasonable.
I think with old age, you realise that you're going to become your parents.
Yeah.
I'm 34 at the moment. Oh my god, I'm just becoming like my parents more and more every day. I actually tell my girlfriend, like, when she sees my parents, I go, you do know I'm going to turn into them. Like, this is what you're going to marry into. Like, a combination of these two people. And she's, oh, bless her, she's fine about it.
Do you mind if I ask, is she Chinese?
She's Hong Kong, from Hong Kong.
Okay.
Which is really good, actually, for me. I was talking to her about it the other day. Growing up here, my parents always... I asked them about, do you have a preference for me to date certain type of people? Like, if I date an English person, would she get really weird about it? And she goes, no, I'm fine about it. It's just, I wish I can talk to her more. Which is really nice. I don't need to have to explain every one of our customs. Like, I don't need to explain why family is important. I don't need to explain our ways. You know, if I have someone to talk to, then it's really, really nice. Because essentially, when you're marrying someone, you're essentially having an extra daughter in her case. And I don't deliberately set out to look for a Hong Kong girlfriend. It just happened to be like that. And then since I started dating her, it's really nice to just bring her back home to talk to my parents and have dinner. And yeah, it's really, really, really great. It brought us closer together.
I think my mum secretly wants that, but she's not been very vocal about it.
It's difficult though. It's easy for people to say, oh yeah, find someone who speaks Cantonese. But let's face it, when you fall in love with someone, you don't know what that person's going to be like. Especially if you're gonna find for a specific type, it's gonna be difficult. I know people who want to find a Cantonese person, but they're looking for Asians. And if you do find someone, you're not going to settle someone on personality. But if the personality is awful, but they speak Cantonese, that's not a thing, you know. It's just a bonus. I like to say it's a bonus.
Has managing Resonate and writing the articles influenced your own identity and educated you about your own cultural heritage as well? Because when I was doing my own dissertation on British Chinese identity this year, I didn't really know much about my own cultural heritage. and there wasn't very much networking with British Chinese across the UK. After getting in touch with about 16 contributors, and Patrick included, to interview about British Chinese identity, I felt more of a sense of community and felt less lonely. Subtly, there's a strong, connected group of people that have a common goal to have better representation in the media. So I became a lot more curious about my cultural identity and my heritage, of where I came from, and finding people who are on the same journey as me.
One of the inspirations I did resonate was that when I was working in the media, I never see other Chinese people like me. I see people from China because I used to work for Chinese companies, but I never see British Chinese people anywhere. And when I worked at the British Chinese Project, there were loads of young British East Asians there, volunteers, were helping us with bits and pieces. And I thought, yeah, it's really, really good to be part of a community and to learn more about British Chinese people. And I remember having a lot in common with them. When I was in uni, I was the only British Chinese person. I went to a uni in Canterbury, which is quite surprising because you think there's lots of international students. But those were international students. I was the only British Chinese person there. So when I left uni, I had an urge to meet other British Chinese people. So I went on the internet at something called a BBC Meet, where BBC people gathered together in London just to sort of make friends. And I sort of met some friends, and they were like my closest friends ever. They're still my closest friends today. And I remember having a lot in common to them, talking to them about, growing up in the UK and all the things that they felt. And that sort of started my interest towards British Chinese stories, editorially wise, in news. Resonate only just helped that. Resonate sort of just made me realise that the stuff that British Chinese people feel in this country, it's the same that Asian Americans feel in America, Asian Australians feel, people from Canada. And it sort of just makes me feel that the world's a lot more smaller place, closer place, that we are not just alone. The things that affect British Chinese people don't just affect British Chinese people in this country. They affect people from around the world.
In a broad sense, is identity in general built, so something you are active in doing, or is identity found, so in a sort of passive sense? I've noticed a lot of people in the West, when they travel to the Far East lands, say Thailand, Philippines, or Vietnam, they always say this one thing: I'm going to find myself. That's what they always seem to say, from the people I met anyway. Is it in the passivity of just traveling that you find yourself? Or is it something that you have to actively build in your psychology through experience and through your own life?
I don't really know. Oh God, we'll be thinking about that for a few days. I can speak on my case though. I found myself as time goes by because it's ever evolving. I talk about stages from my life where I resented being Chinese, but then also talk about stages where I'm proud to be Chinese. I'm proud of, the sacrifices my parents made for me. I'm proud of the fact that the work ethic they instilled into me to make me who I am today. I'm proud of being different as well. I'm proud of have a unique viewpoint on society. I'm proud that I have a shared culture, my English side and my Chinese side. And I think as time goes by, I'm more found my sense of who I am just through my experiences. But then again, it may change within 10 years' time. But I don't know what's going to happen in the future, like what influences will have that change how I think of the world.
I don't especially know what I'm going to be like in 10 years, what things I identify with, because I'm 25 now, and comparing myself to when I was 15, a lot has happened in a decade. Things I agreed with then, when I was 15, I don't really agree with now.
I think that's healthy though. We touched upon how when people argue on the internet, their beliefs are set because they're not influenced by the arguments that's put forward by the opposing side. Is that as intelligent adults, I use that word loosely for some people, for most intelligent people, they should shape us who we are. They should shape the way we think. I mean, Patrick, your background's in science. I mean, every day new discoveries are found and old discoveries are like put in a bin,
right,
disproven. Yeah. It's constantly evolving. I think the same way the argument goes for identity.
But for me, I don't think I was, in those 10 years, consciously trying to reform my identity. It just happened unconsciously. So I think from my personal viewpoint, it was quite passive, my identity formation.
My one was active because of working in editorial and looking at the influences of stories that interest you. One thing I always, when I talk to reporters about Resonate, about what they want to write about, I always ask them, what interests you? Not me. Don't write about things I want you to write about. Write stuff that's you're passionate about. So I think when it comes to the work that I do about editorial, I think about the things I'm interested in, which is identity. So I look for it. So that's my personal belief. But People are different.
So I think it's a bit of both for me. Sometimes I will see a specific characteristic or personality trait and I think, oh, that's the really good thing to have. And subconsciously I sort of just develop that, and one day I just realize, oh, well, that's part of my identity now. So I actively find stuff that I like, and then I passively integrate that into my identity, my personality, and I think that's what happens for me.
Mm-hmm.
But I've said this before, that I don't think it's one or the other. I don't think it's as binary as that. People can work on their identity and their personality, but for the example that Anthony gave, you said your friends, when they go traveling, they say they're going to find themselves. I think that's both, really. You know, they're finding themselves through actively traveling and getting more experience. I think you're finding things to build it with.
There are two things I just want to say again. Something about parents not being home as a child and finding identity. Because my parents came home very late when I was younger. There were not many times where they could teach me about English society and values and how to be a good person. So naturally I had to find substitutes in films especially. I was very inspired by film characters and their morals and their ethics. It just shaped me, and it taught me how they deal with situations as if I was in their shoes. This also happens in music too, and artists, not just in their music, but also how they present themselves in real life. So I taught a lot to myself about personality and character, how important it was to have character. It was something I also did through books too, non-fiction and fiction. By reading, it taught me the value of other people's lives through sympathy and empathy, and how to deal with things in my own life. In a way, I always thought that Western people got their values, or most of their values, from their parents and their grandparents, and have it passed down in this way. But for me, as a British-born Chinese, with my parents not being home most of the time, I found value in principles from the media, and that was very central to my own life. My identity was built from movies, music and books. So I'm not saying it was not my parents' responsibility in shaping me who I am. It was part of it. They were part of the solution. And I understand that parents are busy working a takeaway almost 12 hours a day. But now looking back in reflection, I understand clearly that partly the source of who I am today is from media and entertainment.
I'd probably say the same. You know, in the evenings, I've got the whole house to myself. I'm an only child, and my mum was the only one who raised me. If you're not going to watch TV, what are you gonna do?
They do say that about TV as a substitute parent. I think you actually hit a lot of raw nerves for a lot of people to understand what you're talking about. Like, I grew up with Uncle Phil as my TV substitute dad.
Right.
About morals. Yeah. Like that's what you grew up influenced by. And what time you did with have your parents, you mix that all up in one go, which helps you grow up and see how you view the world and how you view yourself.
Are you interested in foreign journalism? So things happening far away from where you live. So let's say the Middle East, or in the Far East, or in other smaller countries.
In what context?
Just what's happening in their own countries. So politics, military conflicts that have been fought. Are you interested in reading those stories?
You know what? People should be. I'm interested in those stories. I'm interested in hearing what's the big story in other countries. What's the big story in Russia today? Like, what scandal do they have in Macedonia? But the problem is that we're limited by language. Being English, reading English, I only see Western companies broadcasting Western style news. One thing that's really interesting is the nature of EU and Britain. And when I'm in Holland, because I have lots of family there, I like to watch the news. I don't understand what's going on because of language, but I like to watch the pictures, and you can connect the dots of what they're talking about. Because if you properly look into it, you can find out what's the news story in Holland. But it's not, living in Britain, it's not in your everyday feed. If you go through Facebook, you don't see Dutch news. But if you look for it, you could find out. But the thing is about what Dutch people that I've found really interesting is that they know a lot more what's happening around Europe. They know what's happening in France. They've got segments about Germany. They've got segments about Italy and Spain. In England, we don't have anything about EU. I don't think if you ask people who's the French leader, they just don't know who to say. They don't know. Whoops, sorry, my girlfriend. Yeah, they don't even know much about Merkel, how long she's been in term, and they don't know much about Macron. But the thing is, in England, we know more about America than we do about EU. So when the Brexit argument comes along and say, oh, what's the EU done for us? We don't know anything about EU. We're so American-centric in our news because of English language and the spread of American soft power and culture that we know more about them than we do. So the thing is, but when I want to know about what's happening in China, I can't really have access to it until I look for it. But when I look for it, there's very westernized news stories. So they're articles that's created by the BBC about Hong Kong. And there's only like 1 or 2 articles. It's not that many. But if you want to look at stories, you have to properly look into it. And sometimes they don't come to you naturally. So you can't really find it until you actually properly look for it yourself.
Can you tell us how you find stories for Resonate?
News journalism change all the time. In the past, I used to be an investigative reporter because we just couldn't find these stories until we looked out for stories. And that's like talking to people, meeting people face to face. Nowadays, you can just find a story by putting a tweet out there. Do you have an opinion about this? Do you want to talk about this? Or what's happening in Chinatown? So when something happens, you just have to report it. But due to the nature of so much that's happening around the world, there's only so much we can report. So generally, we sort of just find that people normally message us and tell us what is happening.
Right.
And then we do turn it into a news report.
Does that happen quite often? People messaging you with tips?
Now more than ever. When we first started 4 or 5 years ago, it was quite difficult to find stories because there wasn't really much Asian actors or public figures that we can do stories about, or not really much racism going on because people didn't report racism. Nowadays, people report it a lot more. Yeah. Social media helps a lot because social media gives an opportunity for people to message you and tell you what's going on in the world. Mm-hmm. And it happens alarmingly more and more, so much so that we can't actually do some of the stories. It's because you can't call out racism if you're not 100% sure of your facts. So when people say, oh, this person was racist to me, without evidence, we can't publish it because without proof, there's nothing we can do about it. But if people report it to us and they have proof and they have text messages and they have screenshots and they have recordings, then we can do something about it. But at the moment, we do have a lot of people messaging us about news stories. When I was growing up, I was a little bit ashamed of being Chinese. It's because I was the only one in my school growing up in my area. And when you're a kid, all you wanted to do is be like everyone else. But I knew I was different because, my parents worked in a fish and chip shop and I was living upstairs in a fish and chip shop. When I was doing my homework, I had to do it in a place where my mum was working and customers could see me doing homework. As soon as I was tall enough to reach the counter, I was working there, age 14. It's not an upbringing that's normal compared to other kids. So when my friends were saying, oh, did you watch this film last night? I was like, no, I was working. And I was 14 years old. And I really resented that environment that I was brought up in when I was younger. And when we did Resonate, I wanted Resonate to tell people that you're not the only person who felt this way. This is my story, but there's also your story. But in the end, I wanted people to be proud that they're Chinese. And then, because at the moment, when I look back upon my childhood, I think, wow, I learned a lot when I was working really young. I learned a lot about family, finance, marketing even, all the core aspects of business you learn from just working really, really young. I'm really, really grateful for the childhood that I had, but it's only now when I'm older, I realise that. And I sort of just realised when I was doing Resonate is that a lot of young people felt the same way that I did. And I always wanted Resonate to be a publication to be more proud about who they are. This is my place in society, accept me, Yeah. But with all that's happening around the world and the political situation, is that we seem to get a lot more racism stories, which A, is good because people are calling it out a lot more. But B, I don't really want news organisations to be all shouty at the moment. I want it to be sort of a good balance. But sometimes there's no choice in terms of what is happening in the world. People always tell me, why do you always do racism stories? The truth is that's all that there is at the moment. That's all that's involved Asian people. And to be honest, you have to call them out because there's so much stuff that's happening around the world. You have to tell people, this is wrong. You can't do this. And you need to call them on it.
There's been a very recent criticism of Resonate. I hope you don't mind me just quoting it. It's on one of your Facebook posts. I'm not sure if you've seen it. On the post, there was a plastic surgeon who proves that the fox eye trend was inspired by Asian features. And then in the comment section, he says, and I quote, I love Resonate, in air quotes. It's like watching somebody's fevered dream of ludicrous finds on the internet to justify Chinese supremacy. What's your reaction to this comment?
It's some people just don't understand what we do. If you have media and a society that represents you and everything that's about you and the things that you go through, it's very dismissive of what we do as an organisation and the things that British Chinese people go through and diaspora that go through around the world. They just don't get it. People don't understand privilege. When I tell people about privilege, especially white privileges, is if you're disabled and you're going to work. When you go to work, sometimes the trains are delayed, you're late, sometimes, there's lots of people, it's overcrowding. But when you're disabled and in a wheelchair, everything's 10 times harder. You have to get someone to get a disabled ramp for you. People look at you and discuss because you're taking up too much room on the train. You don't know what that person goes through in their daily lives just to get to the journey to work. And then you have to explain everything that goes on in their lives. And then you think, oh, okay, maybe it's a privilege that I have 2 legs. People don't understand the privilege of having white skin in a white person's world. And for them to say that, it's quite dismissive because they don't understand the body of work that we actually do, not just the stories that we call out.
Because I noticed you report on the negative stuff that happens in the Asian community as well.
Yes, we do, but it doesn't really get much attention. I think there's a black guy in America, and there was a racist Asian American who was just calling him the N-word. We do stories like that, just trying to balance it out. But it's true, there's lots of anti-blackness in Asian culture as well. So we do our best to call them out when it happens.
Is it frustrating though? Because that comment sounds like the person missed the point by so far that they just couldn't even understand. I can't even understand the logic behind that comment. And it reminds me of that quote, when you're accustomed to privilege, equality feels like oppression. It's just ridiculous.
But it's true, but this is one of many comments I get in over a 5-year period. I don't even get this on Resonate. I get this on every aspect of my social media. People DM me all the time, telling me you shouldn't be doing this, or you're just stirring hate. Geez. But the thing is, that's their opinion. I'd like to live in a society eventually where we don't have opinions like this. But it's also wrong for not to take criticism in hand. When people criticize it, I look at it and I think, you know what, that person's right. Maybe I do too many of these stories. Or maybe we word this differently. I do take it on board. I think it's the right thing to do. I'm not a person have my head up my ass and say, no, I'm right. I do take it on board, everything he said. Even that guy on the internet that he said, I will think about what he says, but then I know what he meant by it. He doesn't understand what we do. Social media has this weird effect on us, is that if we say something, no matter the populist opinion, if we get likes, it forces us psychologically just to say the things, say anything. It's like, this is right, and lots of people agree with you. But if you explain it, which takes a lot more effort, people are not willing to like that more. So people are a lot more inclined to just say whatever's on their minds. But if you want to really properly learn, you need to listen and hear other people's arguments. And a lot of times, the world's not black and white. I have to tell people about this all the time. One issue is not one-sided. There's always areas of grey. And that's what people get really upset about. People always get upset no, I'm right. No, I'm right. I'm right. No, I'm right. But the thing is, it's somewhere in the middle, because everything is so complex in this world. I don't think I'm a clever man. There are so many people smarter than I am. There are doctors, people studying in their topics, professors. There are people who actually have a background in a certain topic. And as a journalist, you just have to listen and just find out which one's the truth and try and decipher which was the right point. But that kind of thinking is a lot of hard work for most people, especially when you're sitting on the toilet looking at Facebook for your phone. People don't really take time to think like that.
It is frustrating. As a scientist myself, I can sort of appreciate how hard scientific research can be, and just how much effort it takes to become an expert in a given field. And for just a layperson to just completely dismiss all that work because they read one article somewhere on the internet is quite frustrating, I think, and a little bit demotivating sometimes.
It's understandable. What's the point of spending 6 years working on field and being an expert at it for some guy called Tom to come along who read not BuzzFeed, a random article from the New York Post about it. It's I read this, and then that article has no quotes or things that are taken out of context. You have to understand that people need to be more media literate, and it's very, very difficult to be media literate, especially in this age where everything's happening so fast.
And they need to be able to cite their sources, reliable sources as well.
Yeah, but that's too much work for the journalists. I know it sounds really horrible to say this. But a majority of journalists who work in like publications like Daily Mail, they don't really cite things.
Yeah.
They just take quotes and they manipulate quotes, and it's
Right.
very easy to manipulate quotes and make an article to same way as you argue something. There should be more stringent checks, but there's no really law against it.
Right.
If you say something and then you sway it to your side and make it more biased, no one's going to prosecute you. The only thing that you have is your credibility as a journalist. But most people who work in media aren't real true journalists. They're just copywriters, glorified copywriters. True journalists are the people who actually find the story, get the quote, balance it out, cite sources, do actual work. But we don't have time for long form journalism anymore.
Yeah.
We live in a world that's all clickbait journalism, the Uni Lad and the Lad Bible, the Daily Mails of the world, where it's literally headline. We read headlines anymore. We don't read articles.
What does that say about human society?
I sometimes think that the world goes by so quickly. When I was starting working with journalism 10 years ago, is nothing like it is today. Journalism is just basically information on steroids at the moment when you go online. People don't appreciate good journalism, or if they do, it's not that many people. What's that phrase that they used to say? That today's stories is fish and chip shop wrapping paper for another day, or something like that. Basically, stories that happen today is disposable, and it just tells you about how fast society is. You tell one story, doesn't matter the consequences, boom, next story, and go. News is entertainment. It's not about informing the public, it's about entertaining the public.
It's just a bit sad. I think also because there's just so much information out there, I think people feel like they don't really have the time anymore to read full articles. They just read the headlines. And in an attempt to get more clicks or viewers or readers, people try and twist whatever information they've got from like their source to make it more clickbaity, more attention drawing, I guess. And Jun Kit, what you were saying about, like the example you gave was Daily Mail journalists, they don't really write about the truth anymore. They just sort of manipulate it to what they see fit, right?
Well, it's people fall for it. People like to
Yeah.
read it with complete disregard for the responsibilities that they have for as a media company. I'll give you an example. Years ago, you used to have like the 10 o'clock news. And the 10 o'clock news was basically a gathering of all the best stories that's happened today to inform the public in a bite-sized, in a 30-hour program. But now we have News 24 networks, where news TV shows, news channels are meant to fill up 24 hours of news content per day. And how are you meant to do that without recycling the same stuff all over?
Mm-hmm.
So you generate it as in time, real time. That's why there's more prevalence of using social media as sources, or like, oh, this person tweeted this today, or this person like put this video out today. So, and also news media is free. In the past, we used to pay for newspapers. So if you appreciate good journalism, you support that paper. You buy that, the Guardian, the Times, you support them. But now everything is free. It's all about clicks. You get your money through advertising. When it comes to advertising, the more sensationalist the story, the more clicks you get. It's just the nature of how the industry is moving. No matter what people think of Resonate and the choices that we make, I want people to understand that as an organisation, we're evolving and we're actually listening to the people that offers criticism. And I want people to know that we evolve with them. And the way that we do things, there's normally a reasoning behind it.
Thank you for those inspiring words, Jun Kit, and thank you for coming on to our show.
So that's the end of episode 3. It's a really interesting episode. One of the things that I really loved was when he coined the term immigrant guilt. I really related to that. Worrying about disappointing my mum and making her feel like all of her hard work was for nothing. So that's definitely a term I'll be using from now on.
Yeah, me too, definitely. I remember in our first episode with Reverend Mark Nam,
Right.
and at one point he was mentioning not having the vocabulary to express the British Chinese diaspora struggles. And he said that it was difficult for us because we lacked a very particular vocabulary to express how we feel. So when it came to Jun Kit telling us about this term immigrant guilt, I really, really appreciated him introducing us to this term, because it helped summarize everything I have felt and still feel about career choices and making parents proud. And also, additionally, I think it's also very admirable as a media organization such as Resonate, that they're willing to hear feedback from people and evolve with the times. It's such a clear sign of open-mindedness, and I also think it's quite healthy to be adaptable and flexible, don't you think?
Yeah, definitely. At the end of the day, that's what you want from a media organization, because the lens that they put information through to give to people is really important, right?
Yeah.
But unfortunately, it's not what we always get, though.
No, unfortunately not. And also, another thing that Jun Kit said was how fast society was moving. And there was one thing that he said in the episode, which was, today's story is fish and chip wrapping paper for another day. Although this is true, that there is always this constant rush for media companies, newspapers, and their journalists to find new stories, fresh stories, and produce the next day's paper. And this goes on as a cycle every day. I just still don't think stories are completely disposable. And disposable meaning no value. Because I think old news articles can serve a purpose. And that is for historians to use as context when they get to doing their research for writing their future books about our own time in the early 21st century.
Right, yeah.
So I'm sure you have read too, a lot of history books always have these really old quotations from really old newspapers, right? To quote certain events as a source of information. So in some respects, Jun Kit is right. Society is moving extremely fast, and everyday's papers and stories are disposed of. But in the long run, I actually don't think that they don't have any value anymore. But I can totally see where Jun Kit is coming from.
Yeah, that's a really interesting point. I wonder what the history books about our generation are going to be like. Or if they'll even be books, who knows?
Yeah.
Really looking forward to finding that out. But yeah, tell us what you feel. Have you ever experienced immigrant guilt before? Please let us know in the comments, or even get in touch with us, send us a DM or something. We love talking about this stuff, and we'd love to hear your experience. Anyways, that's episode 3 for you. Episode 4 will be out same time next week. Thanks a lot for listening. See you guys next time.